33 impossible ancient inventions they erased from history. The dial shouldn't move, but it does. Bronze teeth catch light, a hand turns, an eclipse date lands 2,000 years in the past, and it's right. Divers pulled the Antikythera Mechanism from a 1901 shipwreck. Scientists called it an ancient computer. If one device predicted the sky, what else slipped under the waves, into ash, into silence? Tonight we pull 33 lost inventions back into focus. Materials that heal in seawater, chords that count in base 10, water that climbs valleys, surgeries that left healed bone. Watch the pattern lock. This isn't a freak miracle, it's a ladder. Someone climbed fast, then kicked it away. The ladder they don't teach. Here's the ladder they don't teach. 4 threads braided tight enough to sprint a civilization. Precision, power control, logistics, information. When these cluster, timelines don't stroll, they lunge. Precision lives in tolerances you can feel. Teeth that mesh without chatter. Granite corners that catch a square. Lenses ground to repeatable curves. Precision implies gauges, jigs, scrap piles, and a culture that rejects good enough. Power control is the quiet harness. Pressure tamed in siphons. Flow metered by gates. Charge stored in vessels. Magnetism nudged into direction. Not megawatts, repeatable stings and steady heads of water that turn tricks into tools. Logistics is choreography. Capstans singing in sequence. Cribbing that breathes a block downhill. Canals that steal a season from the sky. Ropes, sled shoes, crew rotations, inspection niches, maintenance baked in, not bolted on. Information is glue, knots that hold numbers in base 10. Tally splits that police fraud. Memory palaces turning procedures into rooms. Dials and inscriptions that teach the user while they turn the handle. When these threads braid, the climb gets fast. A guild masters abrasion. Tolerances tighten, gearing stabilizes, timekeeping steadies, astronomy resolves, calendars coordinate rites with tides and taxation. Water math without equations, lays pipes across valleys, inverted siphons accept dips as temporary, not fatal. Low-voltage curiosity lives beside resins and acids. Electro-cleaning and etching become workflows. Information systems, Khipu chords, audit stones, split tallies, let states verify and scale. That's a stack, not a stunt. Break one thread and the sprint buckles. Precision without information drifts, no counts, no standards, no trust. Power without logistics stalls, no parts, no fuels, no clean ceramics. Logistics without precision wastes, rigs break, loads fail. Information without power never touches matter, nice records, no leverage. Knowledge dies less from ignorance than from broken pipelines. So the 33 you're about to see, treat them like APIs in an ancient stack. Bearings call lubrication and roundness gauges. Siphons call pressure literacy and sealants. Nanoparticle glass calls furnace discipline and alloy recipes. Surgery protocols call antisepsis, instrument kits, outcome tracking. If one exists, others must lurk nearby, waste pits, miscasts, practice slabs, teaching fingerprints. We'll keep guardrails, stakes, who gain control of calendars, maps, maintenance. Context, does the object sit inside an ecosystem? Slag, jigs, access hatches, legal upkeep. Replication, can modern shops match with plausible constraints? If not, which process is missing? Suppression, who benefits when ladders snap? Priesthoods guarding calendars, courts freezing cannons, monopolies hoarding recipes, conquerors resetting ledgers. We'll use the but therefore rhythm. This looks advanced, but the where scars and tolerances hold. Therefore, a workshop tradition is missing from the record. This looks ritual, but the maintenance, access, and standard dimensions persist. Therefore, dual use is likely. Now let the gears think like mathematicians, the stone breathe like a machine, and the water learn to keep time. Machines that shouldn't exist. Start where bronze learns to think. In 1901, divers pried a corroded lump from a shipwreck off Antikythera. Cleaned, it revealed teeth so fine they whispered rather than bit. The Antikythera Mechanism isn't a trinket, it's a mechanical ephemeris. Turn a hand crank and stack trains resolve the moon's odd stutter through a pin and slot that speeds and slows it the way the sky does. Dials mark eclipses and festival cycles. Inscriptions tell you what to set and what to expect. You don't engrave instructions for a one-off, you train users. Stakes. Whoever predicts eclipses schedules rights, trade, and politics, and bills for precision. Action, CT scans map tooth counts and gear meshes, fragments aligned into differential logic. The build demands flat bronze sheet, repeatable tooth cutting, true pivots, and oils that don't gum. Jigs, squares, scribe marks. The tone of the text, practical, didactic, belongs to a shop tradition, not a court curiosity. Impact. One survivor implies a missing ecosystem. Wooden prototypes, scrap bins, apprentices learning lunar ratios with filings on their sleeves. The metals here, the manuals rotted. Bearings are the quiet revolution hiding in spectacle. On Caligula's Nemi Lake ships, archaeologists documented wooden races and bronze spheres, ball-bearing assemblies that let massive structures rotate with a finger's push. Friction drops, complexity breathes. A bearing requires sphericity, matched diameters, hard surfaces, and lubricants with the right stick. That's calibration culture baked into a pleasure craft. Once rotation is easy, cranes, mills, and turntables move from heroic to expected. Meanwhile, motion begins to carry information. In China, water clocks adopt escapements, metered release that turns flow into counted time. And the south-pointing chariot runs differential gearing to keep a pointer aimed constant as wheels drift over ground. Two wheels drive a differential, differing rotations subtract, preserving heading. No magnet, no stars, just math in wood and bronze. Stakeholders, surveyors, messengers, armies that need direction when the sky is blind. Impact feedback before formula, control felt in the hand. Optics joins the stack. The so-called Nimrud lens, rock crystal polished to a convex curve, may be a magnifier, not a telescope, but it changes hands. Inspect chisels, read finer inscriptions, concentrate sunlight to test heat. Look closely, polishing grooves repeat in arcs, implying jigged motion taught master to apprentice. Precision here isn't an accident, it's a process leaving signatures. Magnification feeds measurement, measurement tightens everything downstream. Stone starts to act like a machined part. Granite boxes with internal corners sharp enough to catch light, long straight saw marks in hard stone that only abrasive slurries can explain. Copper saws ride sand, kerfs track true, faces finish in courses. Inspection niches, lifting bosses left proud for later trimming, matched lid fits, workflow, not miracle. Stakes. When a lid seals and opens cleanly for decades, you're selling institutional reliability. Storage, contracts, sanctity, all enforceable by fit. Now the Roman dodecahedra, hollow bronze polyhedra with paired apertures and knobs. Function remains debated. The tell is repeatability. Whole diameters cluster, opposite pairings recur. Knurling invites grip without marring. Whether textile gauge, rangefinder, or survey aid, they speak standardization. You don't cast dozens with near-identical tolerances across provinces unless a craft needs them to agree. Link the chain. Bearing smooth gear trains, smoother trains stabilize escapements. Stabilized escapements anchor timekeeping. Time clarifies astronomy. Astronomy fixes calendars. Calendars coordinate labor and law. Optical magnifiers tighten tooth quality. Tighter teeth stabilize ratios. Stabilized ratios make regulators trustworthy. Each rung calls the next. Hydraulics hum underfoot. At Lothal, a tidal basin choreographs sluice gates with the moon, managing sediment and draft. Thresholds, weirs, head, pressure literacy turning carpenters into fluid thinkers. Meanwhile, inverted siphons take shape across valleys in Roman hands. Feed a closed line, drop, cross, rise. Water remembers height, not distance. Pipes demand sealants, clean ceramics, and vent points. The principle does the heavy lifting. Craftsmanship makes it live. Micro-stories bring the machines to the bench. A bronze worker touches two gears together, listens for a clean kiss of teeth, and scraps a wheel that hisses wrong. An apprentice polishes crystal, counting strokes aloud, matching arcs to a master's rhythm until the blur snaps into magnification. A harbor steward runs a finger along a gate's edge and feels a burr that would leak on the neap tide. His crew files, oils, resets. A surveyor kneels by a chariot, checks the pointer against a distant ridge, and smiles when it holds while the wheels roll on uneven ground. Skeptic voice, maybe these are isolated brilliances. But isolated brilliances don't engrave manuals, don't repeat dimensions across regions, don't co-locate with slag, practice pieces, and repair ports. The pattern holds. When metal and motion think together, people start trusting mechanisms with their calendars, cargo, and lives. Remember the four threads. Precision breathes in tooth counts and lens curves. Power control hums in escapements and gate valves. Logistics appears in bearing-enabled cranes and dock choreography. Information rides on dials and markings that teach use. Machines that shouldn't exist make perfect sense when the threads braid. And when they braid, a city sprints. Here's the open loop to keep. A device that predicts the sky survived the sea. If the machine lived, where are the textbooks that taught the hand that cut those teeth? We'll follow the fingerprints, where scars, witness marks, inspection hatches, because machines remember their makers even when paper doesn't. Low-voltage workshops. Power without grids lives in jars, resins, and habits, quiet tricks that turn curiosity into tools. In Parthian Strata near modern Baghdad, terracotta vessels show up with bitumen stoppers, a rolled copper cylinder, and an iron rod centered inside. Pour in sour wine or vinegar and a trickle appears, a few tenths of a volt. One jar tingles, a stack bites. It won't light streets, but it will change a bench. Why bother? Because surface chemistry is fussy. Push a mild current and tarnish loosens faster, etch lines hold truer, and a whisper of metal can reach recesses a brush can't. In workshops where alloys meet acids, goldsmiths, die cutters, seal makers, that's not spectacle, that's schedule. Where do these jars show up? Near metalworking quarters, not in isolation. The geometry isn't random. Copper insulated from iron, bitumen sealing moisture, iron sacrificing itself like a modern electrode. No wires on reels, sure. Organics rot, but the functional reading holds. Galvanic curiosity used for work. Action looks small. A die face, black with oxide, sinks into a sour bath tied to a jar. Bubbles cling, gray lifts clean, relief sharpens. A bath charged lightly bites around resist with less undercut. Letters stay crisp. A thin skin of noble metal deposits more evenly where leaf tears. The language is Faraday, it's kitchen talk, sharp water, tired iron, living copper, but outcomes talk louder. Pieces finish quicker. Adhesion improves, clients return, recipes stay in the guild. Static joined the playbill long before textbooks. Rubbed amber pulls chaff, lacquered vessels hold a sting. Treat a bottle like a sandwich, conductive film inside and out, a clean ceramic dielectric between, a rod to gather the crack, and you've got a Leyden-like jar in behavior if not in name. A priest makes straw leap on a dry day and calls it wonder. A master shocks an apprentice once and calls it lesson. Demonstrations by patrons, stings by caution. Magnetism gave direction to commerce quietly. Lodestones align if you let them float on low friction. A spoon points, a needle swings. Guilds keep the trick close because a course set in fog is money saved and lives kept. In shops, magnetized tools self-index for joinery and marking. On coasts, pilots talk about fish that point north while checking shadows and winds. It fits the pattern, habits first, manuals later. Here's the stakes in plain numbers. Low-voltage tricks live where fragile materials and reputations stack. Dye houses with salts, tanners with caustics, metalworkers with copper and iron, temples with dry rooms and resins. Those supply chains co-locate. The culture around them, oaths, apprenticeships, selective demonstration, guards small advantages like treasure. If you can make matter misbehave on command, you don't advertise, you invoice. But what about the insistence that every device in relief is a lamp? At Dendera, the lotus, the serpent, the jed, symbol first, technique second. The honest move isn't to force a bulb into stone, it's to notice device like geometry that persists and remember how often skilled communities wrap method in myth to protect transmission. Iconography becomes mnemonic, safe for public eyes, specific for insiders. Dual use isn't exotic, it's how craft survives courts and conquest. Replication is the sanity check. No city grids, no dynamos, no filaments rule out grand claims. What holds is modest current doing chemistry, static packaged into party trick capacitors, magnetite literacy guiding navigation and alignment. Modern hands can reproduce those outcomes with plausible fuels and materials, not hidden Edisons, patient bench work. Micro-stories make it human. A goldsmith lowers a bronze brooch into a sour bath linked to a jar. When the hum starts, he watches black lift from scrollwork he couldn't reach with chalk. A temple steward scratches tiny marks on a stopper, one nick for copper starboard of the altar, two for iron toward the east, because polarity matters more than words. A dock pilot keeps a magnetized sliver afloat in a leaf bowl. The fog eats the headland, the needle steadies the convoy. A scribe feels a thumb twitch after a curious touch and adds, "Keep dry," to a line in the ledger that never says volt. Impact follows along quiet routes. Electro-cleaning and assisted deposition spread finer ornament because repeatable finish scales. Etching sharpened by current makes dyes and seals more consistent, hardening anti-fraud. Compass literacy stabilizes routes bureaucrats can tax. Temple labs turn demonstrations into budget lines. And the oaths that guard recipes look exactly like suppression when your edge is calendar control, coin quality, map accuracy. Thread it back to the latter. Precision deepens when magnification and electro-cleaning expose flaws you can fix. Power control matures when jars and resins tame stings and flow. Logistics benefits when lodestones cut risk and time. Information rides on seals struck cleaner and ledgers that can trust a mark. 4 threads hum in a quiet room. So if jars bite, vessels hold charge, and stones point without a word for capacitor or compass, what else did those hands do to matter itself? The furnaces waited, glass that changes color with light, steel that sings at the edge, concrete that grows stronger in the sea. Impossible materials in plain sight. Materials by time. They let ideas survive weather, salt, heat, and human error. Start at a Roman pier where waves hammer stone for 2 millennia and the mortar laughs. This isn't Portland cement. It's hot mixed lime with volcanic ash, pozzolana from specific tuffs, dropped into seawater to set in place. Inside the hardened mass, micro cracks become scaffolds. Ions move. Tobermorite and related calcium aluminum silicate hydrates grow like needles, bridging gaps. That's self-healing in chemistry, not metaphor. A crack forms, brine percolates, crystals grow and stitch. You don't luck into that. You quarry by recipe, burn lime clean, mix hot, pour where tide helps, not hurts. Stakes, a harbor that doesn't crumble controls grain, fleets, and taxes. To pull it off demanded more than a bag of ash. It meant kiln temperatures that didn't contaminate lime, ash grade sorted by hand, aggregate size to interlock, and pours scheduled to catch the right stage of tide. Action looks like labor, baskets tipped into formwork, but the impact is maintenance deferred for centuries. When empires snapped, the concrete kept working because its chemistry didn't care who ruled the key. Now glass that changes color with light. The Lycurgus cup reads opaque green in reflection, but glows ruby when lit from within. Under a microscope, the secret is specks, gold and silver nanoparticles suspended in the glass matrix. Their electrons resonate with different wavelengths depending on illumination geometry. Surface plasmon effects do the rest. Nobody in antiquity wrote plasmon, but someone controlled furnace atmosphere and metal additions tight enough to seed particles at the right size and dispersion. That implies clean fuels, reliable crucibles, and test melts that taught breadth and timing by outcome. Stakes here are cultural and technical. Color on command isn't just pretty, it proves repeatable control of redox conditions and temperature ramps, the same discipline lenses and mirrors later require. Action is small tweaks, pinches of metal powder, moments of air or smoke, scaled through practice. Impact is an industry with palettes that don't drift and a pattern, empirical nanotech before language for the nanoscale. Steel brings a different whisper. Wootz, crucible steel from South Asia, earned its legend by microstructure. Artisans sealed pure iron with carbon sources and glass in small crucibles, then held heat long enough for carbon to diffuse evenly. Controlled cools and tight forging temperatures let vanadium-rich carbides segregate into bands within a tougher matrix. Ground and etched, the surface shows watered patterns. At the edge, those carbides behave like tiny saw teeth. Overheat once, you dissolve the phases. Forge too cold, you shatter. This isn't myth, it's process windows taught in songs and scars. Stakes, better blades, chisels that bite granite, dyes that last. Action is hour scale vigilance. A smith reading heat by color and sound, refusing to rush. Impact is export demand that outlived the ore blends and charcoal qualities that made the trick easy. When supply changed and industrial steel flooded markets, the ritual drifted. Not conspiracy, just incentives moving the window out of reach until labs retraced it with microscopes and patience. Bronzes tell a quieter story, surface passivation. Analyses of some ancient bronzes show thin chromium-enriched layers on the skin, a few microns thick, that slow corrosion. Whether from chromite sands contaminating molds or deliberate additions, the outcome is the same, a self-protecting sheen. A foundry doesn't need electrochemistry vocabulary to notice one sand pit yields vessels that last in wet markets longer, and to guard that source like a guild's heart. Tie the materials back to the ladder. Precision rides on matter that behaves. If your concrete heals, your harbor stays true to survey. Capstans and cranes work off predictable edges. If your glass is consistent, your magnifiers and mirrors carry alignment across benches. Gear teeth improve because flaws become visible sooner. If your steel holds an edge, chisels cut straighter, dies strike cleaner, surgeons risk more when trepanning because tools don't betray them. Micro stories make the chemistry human. A lime burner pulls a pebble from the kiln, wets a thumb, listens for the hiss that says it'll slake hot. A wrong note and the whole batch waits. A glassmaster leans into heat, feathers the furnace from oxidizing to reducing with a breath of smoke, watches a test thread flash the right hue. A smith taps a blade's spine, hears the dull ring of overheat, curses, and consigns hours to salvage. The next pot he babysits like a child. A caster chalks river pit on a sack because that sand breaks clean and pours sweet. Skeptic voice, maybe these are marvels cherry-picked from luck. But marvels don't repeat across regions with matching microstructures, don't carry process scars that rhyme, don't anchor infrastructures that outlast empires. The pattern is discipline turned to habit, habit turned to supply chains. Recipes lived in people and places, quarry names, charcoal woods, furnace shapes. When conquest and commerce snapped those threads, the artifacts kept teaching. You just have to read crystals, bands, and sheens the way you'd read a worn gate hinge. Meanwhile, the four threads stay visible. Power control depends on sealants and ceramics that don't creep or crack. Logistics depends on ropes that resist rot and dock faces that don't spall. Information depends on media that endure, glazes that bind ink, tablets that don't flake. Impossible materials in plain sight weren't props, they were operating systems. Water, pressure, and urban intelligence. Materials buy time, hydraulics buys cities. Watch stone learn to think in water. Start with a ridge that wants a bath and a spring that sits across a valley. Rome didn't always build arches in the sky. When wind or budget said no, they buried the arrogance in pipe. Feed a line, drop it down the slope, cross the floor, and rise on the far side, the inverted siphon. Water remembers height, not distance. Stakes. A city that masters head isn't hostage to terrain. Baths run on schedule. Mills wake at dawn. Firefighting becomes plan, not prayer. Action looks like carpenters and plumbers doing math with hands. Stone blocks drilled and keyed, terracotta or lead conduit socketed with care, low points built stout because pressure concentrates there. Vent chimneys to burp air so the crest doesn't stall, settling boxes upstream to take grit before it chews linings. Vitruvius writes cautions later. Pipes already carry the scars. Compression bruises heaviest at valley bottoms, seamless stretches where a good crew ran hot and clean. Impact is civic confidence. Constant head at Casella, the distribution tanks, means neighborhoods know their share. Notched weirs translate flow into law. If water hits the wrong mark at the right hour, someone pays. Bureaucracy rides gravity, and gravity obeys craft. Swing to deserts where showing your hand gets you killed. The Nabateans tucked cisterns into rock ribs and fed them with deception. Cliff gutters stole flash floods and broke the fall so silt died in the forebay. Vaulted chambers plastered with lime, breath just enough to keep walls from sweating salt. Access hatches were human-sized, not ceremonial, maintenance, not myth. Stakes were existential, caravans with appointments at thirst. Miss the window and a route becomes a grave. Action is patience. Channel a sheet of water into stair-step baffles, slow, settle, tame. Lime plaster applied in coats that cure in desert air, keyed with finger lines you can still trace. Impact is predictable water where maps look blank. A stone lip carries a notch that becomes a calendar, open on this wind, close on that sky. Now watch a whole island think in ponds. Sri Lankan engineers built cascades, Elangawa catching monsoon on high ground and handing clear head down the chain. Head tanks take the hit, silt settles in sacrificial basins, spillways step so walls don't walk, cut-off trenches key embankments into old soils. Sluice logs carry scribe marks for height, any farmer can read the rule with a blade. Stakes, rice when the sky sulks, labor calendars that synchronize across valleys. A king buys grandkids with stone and clay. Ports breathe to a different clock, the moon's shoulder. At Lothal, a trapezoid dock let the river push and the tide pull on cue. Sluice gates open to flush sediment into pockets designed to die, thresholds wear arcs that read like usage graphs. Mud plaster and timber swelled to seal when wet, and HVAC for water. Ships that can't afford to wait don't wait. Schedules turn harbors into metronomes. Sewers carry the philosophy underfoot. Cloaky aren't just drains, they're urban memory with gradients. Constant slope, inspection niches at intervals human backs can handle, cover stones sized for two men, trap boxes where a shovel can end a crisis. Signage matters as much as masonry, edicts carved at eye-level tie fines to depth marks. Disease is the fastest tax. Move waste by gravity, not luck, and you buy life. Here's the quiet genius, pressure math without the math book. Head steals your lunch if you cheap a joint. Crews learn by burst and patch, then design again. Inverted siphons breed repair cultures, teams who know which valley wants thicker wall, which low point needs a relief pipe. Cisterns breed measurement cultures, rods scribed with reference notches, weirs that turn flow into counts. Tanks breed scheduling cultures, sluices that hiss like clocks. Micro-stories make the water audible. A mason at a valley floor presses his ear to a terracotta run. Here's the whine that means an air pocket trapped uphill is choking the line. A vent opens, the pitch drops, and bathhouses miles away never feel the save. A desert keeper lowers a reed. It doesn't touch water, it moves sideways. Good. The east wind is up. He chalks a mark and opens the next Puquio, the pair sigh like lungs. A dockmaster stands with a hand on a gate stone. When the shadow meets his cut, he nods. Boys on winches lean, the basin clears. A hull that would have grounded slides free on cue. Fold the 4 threads over this map. Precision is gradients that don't drift and sluice faces that seal clean. Power control is head husbanded, valves, vents, and timing that make wild water domestic. Logistics is network, catchments feeding tanks, feeding fields, feeding markets. Information is everywhere, gauge marks, leveled courses, legal stones, memory palaces that turn routes and routines into rooms you can walk. Skeptic voice, bricks and ditches. But look at the grubby affordances, inspection hatches placed at reach, cover slabs sized for backs, trap boxes shaped for shovels. Ceremony doesn't sweat ergonomics, systems do. Impact is jurisdiction. Whoever measures and maintains water owns calendar and labor, decides which hillside gets a siphon, which valley gets a flush, which field drinks at dawn. That's urban intelligence carved in clay. The suppression engine. While stone learned head and furnaces learned color, something else decided which instructions survived. Incentives. Not villains in capes, ordinary power doing what it always does. Gatekeep, rebrand, hoard, reset. Start with calendars, predict an eclipse and you don't just impress a crowd, you schedule harvest tithes, pilgrimage, coronations. That timing is money and legitimacy. So priesthoods guard tables like treasuries. Copyists copy inward, not outward. Annotations drift from how to who's allowed. Courts do the same with canons and curricula. Stabilize an exam, freeze a ladder. A guild learns a recipe, it swears an oath. A monopoly on ash, on sand, on a certain or vein. That's an annuity you'll protect with fines, exile, or folklore. Ritual becomes a wrapper. A device gets a myth, a procedure gets a procession. That's not fraud. It's packaging that lets knowledge move through centuries that don't love new. If outsiders come, the wrapper is what survives the interview. The tool hides in the symbol until the patron passes or the conqueror does. Meanwhile, markets police secrecy better than temples. A dye house with a fade-proof purple isn't publishing. A foundry with a sand that breaks clean isn't touring. A harbor with the good pozzolana sends guards to the cove and rumors to rivals. Conquest is a reset machine. It doesn't need to burn a library, it just has to starve a payroll. Teachers scatter, kilns go cold, rods rot. The durable parts stay, harbors, boxes, pipes, while the perishable parts, ledgers, cords, songs become mouse nests and smoke. The next regime renames the calendar, changes units, bans the old oath. Yesterday's Khipu becomes witchcraft. Yesterday's gauge becomes idolatry. And syllabus gravity, centuries later, does the rest. Academies tidy their origin stories. Inconvenient competencies become ritual or folk, a polite grave where someone else's pipeline lies. Media make the bias worse. Stone and fired ceramic bloom in the record. Wood and wax die on schedule. Information systems that ran on fibers and knots are underrepresented. Workshops leave slag. Classrooms leave breath. So our archive overweights ends and underweights means. Take advantage of that and you can erase an ecosystem without touching a wall. Change the exam and the next generation stops copying the page that mattered. Who benefits when ladders snap? Anyone who rules by appointment of time, of flow, of verification. Priests with calendars, surveyors with roots, plumbers with head, cashiers with dies. The sharpest move isn't to hoard a wonder, it's to control the affordances, maintenance hatches, gauge marks, seals. That's where authority lives, quiet and enforceable. Last, the quiet suppression, boredom. When systems work, they turn invisible. A siphon that never bursts, a sewer that never smells, a tally that never lies. Budgeteers cut what they can't feel, poets don't praise inspection niches. Culture forgets how to justify the dull parts and the next storm reminds it with interest. So as we trace the 33, we won't ask who hid the miracle, we'll ask who owned the calendar. Who fined at the fountain? Who controlled the ash? Power's fingerprints are where the ladders break. The pattern of erasure, case files of vanishing steps. Case 1, a bronze brain from the sea. The Antikythera Mechanism survived as 82 fragments, teeth, plates, inscriptions that sound like an instruction card. It screams ecosystem, flat sheet bronze, cutters that repeat, pivots that run true, oils that don't gum. Where are the cousins? Wooden prototypes gone to worms, simple calendar boxes remelted, scrap bins dissolved into anonymous ingots, papyrus manuals composted. The shipwreck preserved the outcome, the shoreline ate the pipeline. We keep the durable and lose the ductwork. The miracle isn't the device, it's that the sea archived anything at all. Case 2, Roman marine concrete. The harbors are still there, crystalline needles still knitting centuries after the tax codes that funded them died. Labs reconstruct the chemistry, hot mixed lime, reactive tufts, seawater curring, but the procurement routines vanished. Which ash pits? What kiln profiles? Who decided pour windows by tide and moon? The empire fell, the kiln songs stopped, the flowchart evaporated. Later builders copied surfaces, not process. We rediscover by autopsy what a ledger could have told us in a paragraph. Case 3, crucible steel woots. Blades traveled, microstructures persisted, the ritual slipped. Ores shifted, charcoals changed, crucibles contaminated, industrial steels flooded the market promising good enough at scale. A process window taught by noses and ears narrowed until only museums had the patience to reopen it. The craft didn't die of a rival, it died of a spreadsheet. Case 4, water systems that thought like engineers and were treated like scenery. Nabatean cisterns, Sri Lankan cascades, Roman inverted siphons. Each shows maintenance fingerprints. Inspection niches at reachable intervals, silt traps where shovels can end a day's work, weirs cut to turn flow into policy. When conquerors redirected labor to walls and cavalry, sluices silted, rods rotted, embankments cracked. Villages later saw ponds where their ancestors had seen instruments. They filled them for brick. Case 5, surgery that worked. Healed trepanations with tidy margins across centuries, survival rates in the Andes that would shame 19th century battlefields, hints of antisepsis, resins, honey, open airwork, single-use blades. The outcomes survived in bone, the protocols lived in people and were buried with them when stigma and conquest called the practice sorcery. Moderns infer the checklist from scar and survival. Select patients, scrape not shatter, keep it clean, change dressings, listen for fever. The curriculum fit into ears and hands, not parchment. Case 6, information that scaled states and then was outlawed by paperwork. Khipu cords, base 10 positional knots with color, fiber, and twist encoding metadata, ran censuses, rations, corvée. Split tally sticks turned debt into a joint that policed fraud by the grain of the wood. When units changed and courts banned knots in favor of ink, cords rotted, sticks burned, and the new ledgers arrived with new gatekeepers. The tools that protected the public from the scribe's pen were replaced by the scribe's pen. Case 7, logistics that turned stone into choreography and got mislabeled megalithic mystery. Baalbek's podium isn't 3 magic blocks. It's quarry order visible in undercuts, cribbing logic frozen in lift bosses, sled trackways with crushed lubricant residue. The partially dressed giant still at the quarry is a paused flowchart. When the political window closed, work stopped mid-step. Equipment was smashed or salvaged, and later centuries stared at a frozen conveyor belt and called it legend. Case 8, optics trapped between craft and myth. Rock crystal lenses show polishing arcs that rhyme across fines, implying jigs and counted strokes. But without treatises, the learning curve lives in habits. How many turns before the blur snaps, how to feather pressure so curves don't turn at the edge. Courts buy finished pieces, workshops keep the how. Later, lenses return with telescopes and spectacles. In between, magnifiers lived quietly in benches as tools, not wonders. Case 9, law written on water. Roman Casella had audit stones at eye level, cuts tied to hours and fines. When the magistrate died and the new regime didn't love the old schedule, marks kept their crisp edges for centuries but lost their teeth. Archaeologists read a constitution, residents saw a trough. Now fold the cases over the engine. Gatekeeping manuscripts looks obvious, but the more effective suppression is drift. Unit changes that make chords illiterate, curriculum reforms that make last century's competence invisible to exams, patronage that funds cavalry over sluices, markets that reward volume over ritual precision. Ritual rebranding saves technique until regimes flip and symbols get purged, taking methods with them. Conquest doesn't need to burn, it needs to stop paying the vent man. Micro-stories fix blame and incentives, not mustache twirls. A guild elder dies in a fever. His apprentice knows the tune but not the smell when a crucible is right. 10 pots fail, buyers move on. A knot reader appears before a new magistrate who calls his chords witchcraft. He burns his tools and learns to sign a name. A dock steward's cut on a gate post outlives him by centuries, but without the law that tied it to fines, it becomes curiosity, not enforcement. Zoom out, erasure rarely looks like a torch, it looks like a ladder removed after the roof is tiled. What remains are the durable parts, the process scars, and the affordances, the inspection hatch, the witness mark, the standard hole that let us reverse engineer missing steps responsibly. We'll keep reading stone and bronze for curricula written in where. The manuals are gone. The machines remember. The global echo. While manuals burn in one city, the logic reappears somewhere nobody expects. That's the piece timelines miss. The four threads, precision, power control, logistics, information, don't belong to one coast. They surface wherever constraints rhyme and stubborn problems corner human hands into similar solutions. Convergence sits beside contact. Trade greases it, but you don't need caravans to force a siphon across a valley or a knot into base 10. Think of it like music. Give two ensembles the same scale and a drum that stays in tune, and both will find harmonies that resolve. Meanwhile, a few lucky ports share sheet music, or recipes, lens, curves, head measurements. But the melody lands anyway, even in mountains no ship ever saw. That matters because it kills the easy dismissal. If an artifact were a one-off court toy, you'd file it under eccentricity. But when distant cultures climb the same rungs, measurement culture, pressure literacy, water math verification, then you're staring at engineering under constraint, not a fluke. Get concrete. Base 10 shows up in Andean Khipu chords where figure 8 and overhand not stack in positional rows, and in split tally sticks across medieval Europe, where the grain becomes an anti-fraud signature. Head behaves the same in a Roman inverted siphon and a Connaught grade. Water only cares about height and losses, so builders from Italy to Iran start venting air where the line chokes and beefing walls where pressure bites. Carbide bands don't know your prayer. Woots in South Asia and high carbon edges elsewhere answer the same thermal windows because iron and carbon share physics, not passports. Optical jigs leave polishing arcs in rock crystal from Assyria to the Aegean because a shoulder learns to swing on a radius when a curve must repeat. Trade still matters. A dockworker carries a better sealant recipe between harbors. A weaver smuggles Heddle programs in a belt. A surveyor notes an angled trick on a tablet that rots but survives as habit. But even without a road, rivers and stone teach. If you listen long enough, pressure writes itself in your calluses. Here are the stakes for how we read the 33. Parallel ladders let us triangulate the stack. Find precision tolerances in metal. Look for gauges, scrap, and inspection marks nearby. Find pressure lines crossing a valley, hunt vents, trap boxes, and legal stones. Find robust record systems. Expect audit affordances that police cheating. As the cluster repeats in separate places, coincidence fades and ecosystem odds spike. It also reframes suppression. You can kick a ladder in one city and still wake up to echoes in a desert you've never mapped. That's both comfort and warning. Comfort because competence reemerges. Warning because incentives will try to gate it again. So when we rapid fire the snapshots, don't ask who taught whom. First ask which constraint forced this rung. Then follow the threads to see how far the room ran before the door shut. Snapshot stack, precision and motion. Start with a riddle that acts like a tool. Roman dodecahedra, hollow bronzes with paired apertures and knurled knobs. Stakes, standardization you can hold. Whole diameters cluster, opposite pairs recur, faces true. Whether they sized textiles, cited ranges, or taught parallax, the point is agreement. You don't cast near identical tolerances across provinces unless a workflow depends on them matching. Stone tells on its makers. Granite sarcophagi and boxes wear long, straight saw marks in hard stone that only abrasive slurries explain. Kerfs track true, faces finish in stepped flats, interior corners catch a square with that telltale glint. Inspection niches and lifting bosses left proud until final fit say process, not pageantry. Stakes, institutional reliability, lids that seal for decades make contracts physical. Lost wax megacasting scales precision up. Not trinkets, multi-gate castings where feeders and risers shout shrinkage control. Wax patterns built with draft, clay shells layered for thermal shock, gates balanced to fill without cold shuts. Impact, thin-walled bronzes repeat across regions because foundry math traveled in apprenticeships, not scrolls. Rope becomes structural math in the Andes. Inca bridges braided from iku grass hold catenary and tension in community cycles. Composite cables twisted in consistent lay, deck mats woven and replaced on schedule, renewal ritualized so maintenance never slips. Stakes, survival over a gorge. Impact, a distributed inspection culture wearing festival clothes. Stone sings when tuned. Lithophones, slabs carved to pitch, ring in galleries shaped as waveguides. Node placement and damping by ear, resonance used as sensor. Tap a quarry block and hear defects before you lift. Stakes, non-destructive testing without a lab. Motion starts carrying information. The south-pointing chariot's differential subtracts wheel rotations to keep a pointer aimed constant as carts meander. Hand-cut teeth, true pivots, clearances good enough to limit drift over miles. Direction without stars means survey, courier, and army routes stabilize when clouds win. Bearings whisper revolution. Nemi ship finds, wooden races with bronze balls, drop friction under grand architecture afloat. Sphericity and matched races imply gauges and calibration. Once rotation is cheap, cranes lift smoother, mills grind steadier, and turntables carry loads that used to chew crews. Optics tightens everything. Rock crystal magnifiers, Nimrud and cousins, polished to curves that amplify eyes and hands. Polishing arcs repeat, pointing to jigs and counted strokes. Magnification feeds inspection, inspection squeezes tolerance, tolerance makes gearing civil. Gauge holes and whisper fit pegs, negative space precision, show interchangeability. When a peg from one bench seats without argument in a hole from another, you've crossed from craft to system. That's supply chain in wood. Time turns liquid into ticks with escapements in water clocks. Regulated release trades energy gently. Pallets and teeth handshake their way into counted flow. Shared time schedules labor, settles contracts, and cleans astronomy. Capstans sing when logistics meets motion. Radial bars, pawls that catch, ropes that lay without crossing. Many capstans in sequence move stones that folklore calls magic. Stakes, injury avoided and budgets met by choreography. Impact, Baalbek-style lifts read as campaign plans, crews, cycles, grease, cribbing. Even toys teach metrology. Spinning tops and balanced whimsies lean on center of mass and symmetry learned by fingertips. That intuition walks back into crane hooks and flywheels. Cross-pollination closes loops. Polished lenses improve gear inspection. Bearings make escapements gentler. Tuned lithophones teach wave behavior to builders who then shape halls and docks. Focused sunlight hardens small tools that cut cleaner gauges later. Micro-stories keep it human. A foundry foreman drags a thumb across a wax gate and feels where hot metal will breathe. He trims a riser and saves a casting. A bridge keeper plucks the main, hears pitch drift, and calls the village renewal day. A stone setter runs a square inside a granite box. The catch of light at the corner tells him the lid will seal and sleep. A chariot maker spins 2 gears and listens for the fine hiss that means the pointer won't wander when the road does. Linked to the ladder, precision lives in tooth counts, whole clusters, flatness you can test by light. Power control hums in escapements and low friction bearings. Logistics appears in capstan choreography and ritualized renewal. Information rides in dials, witness marks, and standard holes that teach use and enforce agreement. When these stack, motion stops being muscle and becomes memory. Cities hire mechanisms to keep their promises. Skeptic voice, could these be curios? Curios don't carry maintenance affordances, the price slots, the hatch at a reachable height, the knurl that preserves surfaces. Curios don't repeat dimensions across a map. What repeats is competence, and competence leaves scars you can audit, where patterns aligned with function, standards you can measure. That's the snapshot stack, precision and motion braided so tightly that time itself starts behaving on command. Snapshot stack, power and chemistry. Power shows up as fire you can aim, pressure you can throttle, acids you can trust, and stings you can package. Start with a rumor that burned fleets. Greek fire wasn't a bucket trick, it was a pressure choreography. Heated bronze siphons primed at dawn, joints sealed with pitch and flax, bellows feeding a viscous cocktail, resin, sulfur, light fractions, through valves that turned terror into a controllable jet. It clung, it floated, it reignited. Stakes, straits owned by whoever could set the sea on fire. Action, crews practiced as if loading a heart. One bad seal meant a backdraft. Impact, naval policy became chemistry and plumbing with oaths attached. Burning mirrors aren't cartoons when you scale them honest. Polished metal or hematite taken to soft focus concavity concentrates free heat at the size of a coin. Brazing a pin, annealing a thin tool, lighting pitch without smoke, small wins multiplied. You don't need triremes in flames, you need an artisan's brazier that starts clean and saves fuel. Precision polishing pays twice. Inspection by day, ignition by sun. Now the trickle that changes chemistry. Thin, uniform noble layers turning up inside tight recesses. On seals, dyes, ornaments, read like assisted deposition and electrocleaning. A mild current shifts oxides faster than acid alone, lets gold or silver whisper into corners leaf can't reach. No spools of wire needed. A jar, a bath, a habit. Stakes, anti-fraud hardening as lines sharpen, ornament that survives sweat and rain. Action, copper sinks, silver anodes, sharp water mixed by nose, not meter, stoppers nicked to remind polarity. Impact, standard faces spread further with fewer rejects. Bureaucracy gains leverage because its impressions don't lie. Etching gets teeth, pitch or wax drawn fine, baths timed by bubble and smell, a jar's bite stabilizing edges so letters don't undercut. Dyes copy dyes without drift, marks resist forgery. Seals move truth from mouths to metal. Magistrates sleep easier because a bath behaved. Distillation turns kitchens into labs. Clay retorts, dough-sealed lids, coils running through cooling jars, thicker resins, brighter turpentine, purer alcohols. Binders that don't chalk in the sun, pigments that punch truer, cements that hold when damp, recipes climb because fractions separate on command. Stakes, shipyards and workshops that can count on consistency. Action, lids clamped, leaks sniffed and patched, temperatures read by ear and eye. Impact, repeatable outputs replace luck. Small shops behave like factories before the word. Ship hulls get armor you can't see. Pitch brewed with copper salts and herbs goes under the waterline, biofouling hates it. Drag drops, voyages short and profits swell. Ropes smoked and salted, timbers soaked right. Preservation chemistry makes logistics predictable. Stakes, grain on time, armies that don't eat their seed. Fermentation learns to do more than refresh. Honey, wine, vinegar, and plant resins become antiseptic dressings. Mashes turn antimicrobial. Couple that with single-use blades scorched clean and sunlit work, and trepan skulls heal at rates that stun moderns who assumed superstition. Outcomes don't care about theory names. Protocols live in taboos and songs. Don't reuse that tool, keep it in honey. Change the cloth when it smells wrong, do it where wind moves. Lives saved accumulate into discipline. Ignition becomes messaging. Concave mirrors throw heliograph flashes ridge to ridge. Shields of standard size set codes. Oil-lit reflectors carry agreed counts. Stakes, mobilization without runners, orders across valleys in heartbeats. Meanwhile, acoustics meets chemistry down in stone. Controlled smoke doses under smart airflow turn caves into pharmacology and theater with HVAC logic. Rope and timber preservation keeps cranes honest and masts alive. Vats tended like soups, coils rotated, resins brewed for flex in heat and cold. A foreman drags a nail across a cured hull, listens for a dry whisper. The brushers did their job. Micro-stories keep it close. A siphon crew warms bronze at dawn, smears a seam that smells like pine and sea, and nods when the first stroke doesn't spit back. A die cutter lowers yesterday's work into a quiet bath. When the gray lifts clean from tight curls, he breathes out and reaches for the resist. A glassworker angles a mirror, wakes a brazing spot without smoke, then turns to scratch a line whose crispness tells you the bath was right. A surgeon taps a blade through flame, holds it in a clean current of air, and waits for the note that means it's ready. Thread the four again. Precision improves when etch lines hold and plated corners don't flake. Power control is pressure, heat, and charge tamed into repeatable steps. Logistics rides hulls that slip and ropes that last, distillates that standardize binders and glues. Information hardens when seals strike true and flashes mean the same thing on every ridge. Skeptic voice. Spectacle fades under maintenance. Siphons with replaceable seals, stills with standard coils, baths with stoppers nicked for polarity. Tools, not talismans. Chemistry behaved because people made it behave, and cities ran on that quiet obedience. Logistics and water. Watch logistics lace through water until stone starts moving like a supply chain. Baalbek's podium forces an unromantic question. How do you choreograph hundreds of tons without breaking your city? Stakes. One slip kills crews and reputations. Action. Quarry order comes first, undercuts staggered with bedding planes exploited, lift bosses left proud like handles, prize slots and witness ticks marking this face up. Cribbing climbs in lifts, stack, shim, grease, rest, while capstans sing in sequence. Sled shoes ride on clay trackways slicked with oil or fat, rollers managed, not mythical. Survey marks keep the course level across ground that forgives nothing. Impact. Monotonous miracles stack into policy. A platform rises because every move had a maintenance plan. Nazca's Puquios turn desert to instrument. Helical wind catchers drive air into subsurface galleries. Pressure nudges groundwater along stone-lined veins to fields that never see a river. Access shafts double as maintenance ladders and dust filters. Lime plaster keeps losses down. Silt traps sit where flow slows by design. Stakes, water or none. Impact, a plumbing ledger that breathes with wind, not wheels. Ports choreograph tide and silt like rivals that can be hired. Lothal's trapezoid basin accepts the river's push and the moon's pull. Sluice gates open on the turn to flush sediment into sacrificial pockets. Inlets bend to steel velocity. Thresholds wear arcs that read as usage graphs. Mud plaster and timber swell to seal. Wet logic. Stakes, ships that can't afford to wait. Impact, departure windows shrink from days to heartbeats. Roman inverted siphons bury arrogance in pipe. Valleys stop being walls, they become pressure valleys. Action, lead, stone, or terracotta conduits drop, cross, and climb. The low point carries thicker wall and a vent to burp. Distribution tanks upstream settle grit. Notched weirs translate flow into allocations written on stone. Stakes, head on tap where politics needs it. Impact, mills wake on schedule, baths run predictably. Firefighting becomes plan instead of panic. Nabatean cisterns hide in rock ribs, catching flash floods with gentleness. Cliff gutters feed buried chambers, inlets break flow with steps, lime plaster breathes and seals, vaults curve to shed stress, access hatches size for one back, not ceremony. Stakes, caravans keep appointments with thirst. Impact, a kingdom that looks like rock runs on calendars carved in runoff. Sri Lankan Wiwa cascades make monsoon obedient. Head ponds take the hit, settling tanks strip silt, spillways step like music, cut-off trenches key embankments into old soils, sluice logs scribe for height so any farmer can read the rule. Stakes, rice when sky sulks. Impact, paddy fields breathe through dry spells, labor calendars synchronize, a bureaucracy writes itself in water. Sewers are logistics in a lower key. Constant slopes, inspection niches at reachable intervals, cover stones sized for two men, trap boxes that let a shovel end a crisis. Edicts carved at eye-level tie fines to depth marks. Stakes, disease is the fastest tax. Impact, waste moves by gravity and law, markets tolerate summer. Anti-fouling disguises schedule discipline as varnish. Resin pitched with copper compounds and herbal biocides brushed onto hulls, ropes smoked and salted, masts soaked. Stakes, weeks saved, rot delayed. Impact, predictable turnarounds ripple through markets and courts. Connective tissue is where logistics proves itself. Every system invites repair, access shafts, niches, trap boxes, that respects human constraints. Every measurement invites verification, gauge rods, notched weirs, audit stones. That's information serving flow. Every flow respects materials, lime that breathes, pitch that seals, timber that swells. That's power control behaving. Precision sits under all, gradients that don't wander, fits that don't leak, lids that don't rattle. Micro-stories make the choreography personal. A foreman drags a reed through wet clay on a sled path. If the ripple closes too slow, the track needs water. Too fast, crew feet will slip. A Puquio keeper drops a tuft of llama hair into a shaft and watches it skitter. The winds pushing, open the next spiral to balance draw. A Roman plumber runs fingers over a lead seam, feels a cold patch, and sends for brazing before the low street floods at dusk. A Sri Lankan scribe marks a sluice log with a knife. The notch will outlive him and the farmer who argues in the hungry month. Skeptic voice, bricks and ditches. But bricks and ditches with inspection hatches, standard sizes, and choreographed gates aren't random. They're policy you can audit. Impact is sovereignty. Logistics plus water decides which hill becomes a city, which valley gets a harvest, which harbor sets a tariff, which desert route feels safe. That isn't infrastructure. That's a constitution written in gradients and gates. Information systems. Information is the thread that makes precision, power, and logistics behave. Start with chords that count. Khipu base 10 positional knots on pendant chords tied to a primary line turn numbers into touch. Figure 8 knots mark ones, stacked overhand knots mark tens and hundreds. Position along the pendant sets the power of 10. Color, fiber twist, spacing, and groupings carry metadata, province, crop, duty. A Quipu runs fingers, not eyes, and reads a census faster than ink. Stakes, rations, labor, and taxes that match mouths. Action, chords grouped by district hang from a master. Bundles mirror administrative hierarchies. Audit is built in duplicate sets in different hands reconciled by pattern and sum. Impact, a state scales without parchment. When units change and chords are outlawed in favor of pens, the system dies not because it's weak, but because a new court moves the goalposts. Wood splits truth in half. Tally sticks cut notches for amounts, then split through the grain. Lender holds the stock, debtor holds the foil. Only matching edges make a whole, counterfeiting fights the tree, not a stamp. Stakes, verification without a notary. Impact, contracts walk in pockets. A burned office can't erase a notch that matches a mate 2 counties away. Memory builds rooms when shelves burn. Orators, monks, clerks, memory palaces map procedures to places. A fountain's allocation becomes a stair with 3 steps. Inspection intervals hang in a corridor window. Exceptions live behind a door painted east. Stakes, continuity when copyists starve. Action, a maintenance head walks an invisible building each dawn. If a niche wasn't opened in the mind, a niche wasn't opened in stone. Impact, institutions survive a winter on breath alone. Textiles hide code in pattern. Complex heddle orders and treadle sequences program repeats and conditionals in warp and weft. Stakes, standardized output across looms and towns. Action, a master's sampler carries the program. Apprentices copy by foot feel and finger count. Impact, cloth becomes ledger, borders signal temple tithe. A stripe signals tax paid. A motif marks official issue. Direction becomes bureaucratic when magnet meets habit. Lodestone spoons and later needles stabilize headings. With sun shadows and star notes, clerks standardize routes. Stakes, timetables for land and sea. Action, road markers align with bearings. Forms include headings as expected fields. Impact, wandering becomes violation. Fines attached to drift as surely as to depth at a casella. Seals, dies, and standards put trust into things. Cylinder seals roll signatures. Coin dies match city faces. Weights rest in temples with edicts carved beside them. Stakes, trade at distance without argument. Action, a die face is audit, micro nicks a line. An official ring bites wax over a tally. A merchant's weight tests against the stone. Impact, fraud hikes its costs. Honest exchange moves faster. Acoustics carries messages where sight fails. Waveguide halls focus claps. 2 sharp strikes mean open. A long roll means close. Stakes, compliance without ink. Action, guards don't need a note to repeat it. Rhythm remembers. Impact, instructions move by echo in markets and tunnels. Counting boards and abaci put place value under hands. Pebbles slide in grooves. Carries and borrows become muscle memory. Stakes, arithmetic as habit, not ceremony. Action, a clerk at a notched weir turns flow into units without pausing to write. Later he records totals everyone trusts because they watched him count. Impact, numbers travel before numerals. Maps assemble from mouths. Paraploy sailors' perimeters become coastlines, distances as days, hazards as names. Dragon's back means shoals. Stakes, safe ports and taxed routes. Action, a bureaucracy listens to pilots. A clerk sketches while a seaman swears to a headland's shape. Impact, oral charts harden into ink. Borders become expected, not guessed. Information polices itself at the fountain. Audit stones, casella carry gauge cuts. Rods carry notches. Fines tie to water height at an hour. Stakes, theft visible. Action, if the mark and the hour disagree, someone pays. Impact, neighborhoods don't argue feelings. They point to a line and a law. Music teaches measurement. Lithophones tuned to pitch become yardsticks. A quarry block that sings wrong hides a fault. Stakes, non-destructive test where a return would ruin a season. Action, a foreman's ear becomes a lab. Impact, fewer bad lifts, more trust in the unseen. Micro-stories make it human. A not reader runs a thumbnail down a pendant, feels a new mouth added last winter, and adjusts rations before a complaint. A clerk splits a tally, presses both halves to his cheek. The cool sits the same and files the stock. A loom mistress taps a treadle in the same cadence she uses to calm a child. The pattern never drifts. A fountain inspector's rod clicks the same notch every dawn. The sound is pride and peace in one beat. Thread the 4 again. Precision relies on standards and audits, seals, weights, rods. Power control depends on procedures remembered and verified, palaces in heads, acoustics in stone. Logistics needs routes and schedules stabilized by direction and maps. Information is the glue, cords, sticks, dies, halls, boards. Skeptic voice. This isn't romance, it's ergonomics of trust. These systems behave because they were designed for hands, ears, and eyes that could be trained, audited, and replaced. That's how cities remember and how ladders hold. False ending, why this shouldn't be possible. Step back and look at what you just walked through. Separate peaks from distant places shouldn't rhyme this tightly by accident. Mechanical brains predicting eclipses in the 1st century BCE. Granite boxes with machinist corners. Crucible steels tuned to microstructures. Harbors that heal themselves. Cords that count in base 10 and police fraud by touch. These aren't glittering one-offs. They're rungs from the same ladder. Precision, power control, logistics, information, showing up together, acting like an ecosystem. The skeptic move is healthy. Call it ritual, call it coincidence, call it elite toys. But curios don't carry maintenance affordances, pry reliefs, inspection niches, knurls that protect surfaces. Curios don't repeat dimensions across provinces. Curios don't anchor bureaucracies that find by gauge mark an hour. And curios don't leave identical process scars, polishing arcs that repeat, feeder remnants placed where hot metal breathes, scribed witness lines that align lids you'll never see again. What about misdating, contamination, or modern repairs? That's why we demanded context plus replication plus scars. If a battery sits alone in a shrine with no metal waste, we downrank it. If plating is uniform inside tight recesses near metallurgical quarters and residues match baths, we allow assisted deposition. If a siphon valley's pipes are gone, but terracotta downstream carries compression bruises at the low point and vents sit where a tired back can reach, we can test that profile in a flume. The guardrails hold. And yet one thing still shouldn't add up. If complex stacks need workshops, guilds, and curricula, where are the manuals? Why do we catch finales in bronze and the rehearsals only in rumor? Because the record keeps durable parts and loses instructions. Stone and fired clay bloom. Wood, cord, wax, and voice die on schedule. Conquest, canon, market secrecy, and plain whether finish the job. So here's the paradox. The tighter the pattern, the more it proves the ladders existed. But if ladders existed, who kicked them out? And why did the city forget where it put the rungs? You could blame villains. Or you could follow weather, payrolls, oaths, calendars, and boredom. The answer isn't one fire in one library. It's a dozen quiet pressures snapping pipelines until Tuesday's maintenance reads like myth, and the miracle looks lonely only because its cousins composted. The breaking points, how ladders snap. Start with climate, the slow knife. A city that breathes through tanks and gates survives ordinary droughts. A string of bad years becomes something else. Monsoon shift starves Sri Lankan cascades, spillways step correctly but head never arrives. In the Americas, drought cycles turn cliff towns into ghost walls, tree rings carry the rhythm, abandoned cisterns carry the rest. In the Near East, dust layers match imperial collapse. When rain stops paying the calendar, water math breaks, labor schedules wobble, and the bureaucracy that wrote its law on flow loses leverage. Conquest churns crew lists. Armies don't recruit bathhouse plumbers first. Elites die or run, apprentices scatter, shops burn hot then go cold. You don't need a book bonfire, you need a payroll cut. A pressure line without its vent man gurgles until a seam bursts. A cistern without its keeper silts in one season. A foundry that loses ore access and a master in the same month becomes a blackened room that smells like stories nobody will fund. Economics erases nuance quietly. Crucible lines that require perfect ore and patient charcoal lose to mills that spit uniform steel cheap. Dye houses guarding a purple fixed dye when courts change fashion. Chemistry didn't fail, margins did. Standardization flattens craft, great for rails and rifles, fatal for recipes that lived in noses and fingertips. Industrial triumph rewrites the exam. Anything outside the new rubric becomes hobby. Media is a mundane guillotine. Khipu cords rot, tally sticks burn, dye ledgers on cloth turn to nests in a wall. Temple basements flood, wax warps, papyrus becomes peat. Durable parts, harbors, boxes, pipes survive, perishable instruction sets die on schedule. Later we touch stone and call it mystery because the page that taught the trick fed a mouse in a hungry winter. Social resets deprecate whole stacks overnight. A calendar change turns yesterday's eclipse table into heresy. A new court statute switches units, cords become illegible by law. Patronage flips from harborworks to cavalry, sluice keepers lift stones on walls, their rods leaning in corners until rain forgets them. A conqueror names your gauge pagan, your seal sorcery. Practical craft hides or dies in a week. Ladders don't break clean, they fray. A harbor heals itself for another century even as the batch book is gone. A rope bridge holds because a festival keeps renewal alive, even when the road it serves no longer matters. A surgery protocol survives as taboo and smell. Honey dressings, fire-kissed blades, open air, long after the word for infection becomes a demon. Outcomes hang while why slips, until a famine or a levee snaps the last strand. Technology's success can kill the path that built it. A guild so good at electro-cleaning and assisted deposition that its coins gleam and seals bite deeper becomes a target. The state caps it as secret, Oaths harden. A purge later, the line goes dark because a court can't afford rivals and won't afford the tolerance to keep talent sweet. Canon smiles and trims. A scholar curates a history that marches neatly toward his classroom. Messy competence that arrived too early gets mumbled as ritual. Funding follows footnote trails that avoid mud. The mud is where the work lives. 30 years later, a field forgets it even saw a process scar. Markets suppress without trying. A monopoly on a Pozzolana cove makes an empire's piers sing and keeps other quarries silent. War closes the cove. Nobody remembers the second best blend because it never paid to keep it alive. A resin supplier dies. Anti-fouling fails slowly. Schedules drift. Yards switch to a cheaper, worse mix and call it fine. The cascade isn't conspiracy, it's gravity. Geology edits masonry without malice. Perfect gradients depend on soils that haven't moved. Siphons depend on valleys that haven't heaved. Inlets depend on rivers that don't wander. When ground shifts, a level lies. The edits compound until a city chooses a different ridge and leaves inspection niches to bats. Here's the dependency stacked naked. Precision needs material predictability, trained hands, verification habits. Power control needs tight seals, stable recipes, patient timing. Logistics needs roots, storage, slack in labor and grain. Information needs media, auditors, legitimacy. Kick one leg, you wobble. Kick two, you fall. Slack buys time. Redundancy buys forgiveness. Ritual renewal is slack disguised as devotion. Audit stones are slack disguised as law. Lose both and the next drought, levy or fashion season topples more than taste. Human moments make the losses legible. A lime burner hears the wrong hiss from a pebble and dumps a cart the shop can't afford. 2 bad seasons later the pit closes and the harbor loses a nose. A Quipucamioc buries cords with a child's toys when soldiers come for idols. A desert cistern keeper dies in a caravan pox. The next flood carries silt over a lip nobody shouldered with stone. A festival goes quiet. A bridge sags by spring. So ladders snap not with a single villain or knight, but with a chorus of small decisions tuned by droughts, wars, markets, media, and pride. Manuals aren't missing because someone hid them well. They're missing because people stopped needing them, until they did. Then everyone noticed the ladder only as their foot found air. The survivors, what we can still read. When ladders snap, stone keeps the minutes. What we still have are the durable parts, the scars of process, and the affordances built for hands that never thought we'd be reading them. Start with the hard witnesses. Petrography pulls recipes out of Roman marine concrete. Hot mixed lime clasts rimmed with reaction halos, pozzolana shards, brine-grown needles of tobermorite stitching micro-cracks shut. Fracture maps show where the mix healed itself, long after accountants stopped paying attention. Lead seams on pressure lines tell which joints ran hot and which valleys carried head. The compression bruises at low points are pressure's autograph. A granite box face polished flat against a lapping plate whispers grit size by its sheen. A square catching light at the corner is a machinist's smile left in stone. Ceramics talk in fluorescence and fatigue. Lime plasters inside desert cisterns glow under UV where breath moved. Salt blooms mark where maintenance failed late. Terracotta pipes bear ovalized scars heaviest at valley lows, proving load paths better than any paragraph. Mud plaster in tidal docks holds microfossils, brackish signatures settling arguments about tide faster than drawings. Quarry walls preserve undercuts and wedge trails. Lift bosses and pry slots freeze sequence like a paused tutorial. Biology keeps receipts too. Lipids cling to amphory. Residues in wound dressings confirm resins and honey that weren't magic but antimicrobial. Trace elements in steel blades point to ore provinces. Carbide banding in woots tells heat histories no scribe set down. Dental calculus traps fibers traders chewed and herbs surgeons leaned on. Pollen in sediment layers dates terrace agriculture. Tree rings timestamp droughts that line up with abandoned sluices. Replication labs become our second sight. Pin and slot cams cut in bronze finally produce lunar anomaly without equations. Tolerance is rediscovered by shims and skinned knuckles. Crucible runs ban carbides only when ore, charcoal, and cooling sing together. Ritual is process in disguise. A flume with a notched weir yields numbers that match cuts on Roman audit stones. Lenses ground to the polishing arcs seen on ancient crystal make blur snap the same way under a lamp. Scans peel time without chisels. Lee DAR pulls waterworks from jungle canopy. Ground-penetrating radar outlines sluice channels under fields that look flat. CT and muon imaging red gears inside corrosion, inscriptions beneath patina. A chord once read by fingers becomes a graph. Clusters and colors group as provinces and duties. Memory palaces reappear in brain scans as the same spatial tricks we still use to keep a checklist alive. Oral traditions, long shrugged at, keep passing truth tests. A village that renews a rope bridge with a festival isn't quaint. It's a maintenance contract with music. A desert clan that times a cistern opening by a wind in a shaft describes a pressure trick engineers now name. Place names for good ash point to Pozzolana coves. Singing sand maps to foundry quality. Stories preserve affordances when syllabi wander. Affordances are the Rosetta Stones. Inspection niches at reachable heights, lids that seal by their own weight, gauge marks cut where hands meet flow. These teach use beyond language. They let strangers cooperate. They let us audit centuries later. We may not read every manual, but we can read every witness mark, every standard hole, every trap box built for a tired back. That's enough to test the stack responsibly if we keep the guardrails up. Objections answered, watch responsibly. Let's put brakes on our own enthusiasm. This is where we earn trust. First, the cherry-picking trap. One wonder proves nothing. We demand ecosystems, scrap near mechanisms, slag beside blades, inspection ports along pressure runs, legal stones policing flow. If a precision box sits alone without lapping plates, gauge pins, or unfinished cousins, it stays intriguing, not dispositive. Second, misdating and contamination. Floods shuffle layers. Museum repairs seed residues. Modern tools leave ghosts. So we cross-check. Stratigraphy plus short-lived organics for radiocarbon, thermoluminescence on fired clays, epigraphy where inscriptions survive, petrography on mortars, boring explanations first. A uniform plating in tight recesses near metallurgical quarters beats a lonely battery, jar in a shrine with no wires, tools, or baths. Third, ritual isn't a hall pass or a dismissal. Dual use is normal. A temple relief can frame a device. A festival can carry a maintenance plan. We test with behavior. Tools show wear, access, and standardization. If geometry keeps matching functional devices across sites and replication works within plausible constraints, we give the technical reading equal weight. If not, it stays maybe. Fourth, replication sanity. CNC can fake anything, irrelevant. We ask, could plausible ancient workflows reproduce performance? Fuel budgets, tool wear, labor cycles, repair paths. If the hard step is a temperature window or jig motion a shoulder can learn, we're in craft territory. If it needs abrasives or alloys that didn't exist, we pull back. Publish failures, that's where insight hides. Fifth, narrative gravity. Conspiracies sell, careful doubt doesn't. Our cadence stays, but therefore not and then. This seems advanced, but the context holds, therefore missing steps likely existed. Or flashy, but context fails, therefore it remains a maybe. Time-stamp certainty and list what would change your mind. If new analysis undercuts a favorite, we move. Sixth, beware the one photo proof. We prefer trench maps to thumbnails, lab reports to vibes. Maintenance affordances weigh heavy, inspection hatches, standard lids, trap boxes. If grubby efficiency shows up where nobody would ritualize, the technical reading strengthens. If not, don't force it. Seventh, independence of lines. Two or more signals, material analysis plus performance, distribution plus standardization, inscription plus wear. Lone exotica invite noise, harmonies persuade. Eighth, acknowledge perishable ghosts. We're biased towards stone and metal, wood, cord, wax carried the how. Hypothesize likely intermediates, wooden prototypes, rope and clay training rigs, then look where they might last. Caves, deserts, shipwrecks, dry basements. Absence is a research plan, not proof. Finally, be precise about stakes. We're widening competence, not inflating mystery. The pattern holds without aliens or golden ages. It holds with people learning under constraint, losing media, protecting margins, and rebuilding. If you felt the pattern tighten and the guardrails tighten with it, you can keep watching with your head on. That's how wonder and discipline share a bench. The meaning and the stakes now. Here S where it lands on us. The four threads you just watched, precision, power control, logistics, information, aren't relics inside glass. They're the dependencies our lives still sit on. Swap bronze for firmware, rope bridges for cloud regions, audit stones for dashboards, and the stack is the same. Make matter behave, make flow predictable, make memory trustworthy, and make cooperation scale. Modern fragility rhymes with ancient resets. A data center loses a cooling loop because a valve spec didn't make it into the overnight patch. The temperature rises, load sheds, a hospital's records crawl. A port shuts for 3 days because a crane vendor changed a signing key. Grain backs up, prices jump, contracts wobble. A factory's resin supplier gets acquired. The glue meets spec but fails at heat. An aerospace line quietly reworks 1,000 parts. None of that feels like a library fire. It's a ladder snapping one rung at a time. Look straight through the 4 threads now. Precision today is tolerances defended by measurement we trust. Calibrated rigs, versioned models, bills of materials that travel with parts. When metrology drifts, because the lab got trimmed or the only person who could feel the fixture retired, your corners stop catching light. The part fits on Tuesday and seizes on Friday, and the error doesn't announce itself until the customer ships. Power control is no longer pitch on a seam. It's grid stability, inverter, firmware, battery chemistry that ages the way planners assumed. Swap one additive to save a quarter, and suddenly a bus fleet doesn't make a winter. A micro substation misses a software update and turns a summer storm into a blackout 3 neighborhoods deep. In the old stories, a siphon needed a vent. In ours, a converter needs a patch and an orderly rollback. Same principle, pressure, literal or electrical, wants to be managed by people who know where the choke points live. Logistics is just water math at global scale, ports, chips, rare earths, and the human cycles that keep them honest. You don't need a siege to stall it. You need one customs change or one exploited password. The channel isn't a canal cut in clay, it's a vendor portal and a container booking system. If a resin batch fouls or a port shuts, that ripple doesn't care about your slide deck. It cares about redundancy and slack built ahead of time. Information is the glue as always. Audit trails, double seals turned into multi-party approvals, ledgers you can't edit without leaving fingerprints. We keep pretending an email thread is a contract. It is. A split tally built-in software, 2 sides that must match, still beats a quiet database field any day. If the fountain had a gauge mark tied to fines, your system needs an equivalent, a cut you can point at when someone asks, who opened the valve? The incentives haven't changed. Patronage became quarterly targets and runway. Canon became the curriculum that says which problems count. Market secrecy is the same protection that kept a good Pozzolana cove quiet. Media fragility is now ephemeral docs and tribal chats that vanish when a logo changes. You don't need an enemy to lose a recipe. A reorg will do. So what's practical? Map the 4 threads in your world and protect the pipelines. Small and specific beats, grand and vague. Where does your precision live? If it lives in one senior tech's shoulder memory, pull that into jigs, gauges, and docs with affordances. Witness marks in code, not just comments. Build your equivalent of a standard hole, a test that accepts a peg from another bench. Where is your power control? If a vendor's black box runs your inverters, write a runbook you've actually practiced. Find the burp vent in your system, the thing you open under stress so head doesn't blow a seam. Practice it on a quiet Wednesday, not in a storm. Where is your logistics brittle? If your route goes through a single port, if your chip comes from a single fab, if your link depends on one engineer who always fixes it, add slack on purpose. Redundant suppliers, buffer stocks that feel wasteful until the tide turns, contracts with failover. It's a cascade of weirs, not a straight pipe. Where is your information honest? Build split tallies digitally, immutable logs that can't be cleaned up, approvals that require 2 hands. Put the gauge marks where citizens, customers, auditors, your future self, can see them. If a Roman inspector could point to a line and decide a fine, you can publish a metric and tie it to a consequence. At the team level, formalize what used to be song. Festival as maintenance still works. Put your renewal cycle on a calendar with a party at the edge of it. Rope bridge logic for code and operations. Once a year, everyone replaces a strand. Rotate on call, retest the runbooks, rebuild a piece from scratch by someone who didn't write it. If the pitch of the main cable drifts, metrics, not vibes, you convene the nodding crew. At the company level, reward the inspection niche, not just the temple facade. Fund the test jig, the lapping plate, the unglamorous burp vent for your pressure line. Build standard holes interfaces that accept pegs from another bench. Audit for wear in the negative spaces. How often did we open the maintenance hatch? Did the notched weir match the allocation? Which failure taught us a new notch? If it's not measured, myth will fill the gap. At the civic level, treat infrastructure like a constitution again. Put the gauge marks where people can see them. Power reliability dashboards, water loss indices, procurement tallies with split stick logic. If a fountain inspector in Rome could point to a mark and fine a thief, your city can publish a target and tie a budget to it. Add redundancy that's legible. Second sources written into contracts. Open standards that let a replacement fit without a bespoke prayer. The point isn't nostalgia, It's competence under constraint. In the academy and the press, watch the canon reflex. Don't file messy competence under curio. Fund the replication lab that publishes failures next to the shiny video. Teach students to read process scars in code and policy in stone. Reward the paper that says the plating inside the recess is uniform. Residues match this bath. Context shows a shop, not a shrine, as much as the one that names a new grand theory. Exams should make room for annoying anomalies. They're the threads that keep ladders honest. Here's the stakes sentence with no romance. If we don't treat knowledge as an ecosystem, people, tools, media, and incentives, the next snap won't look like a fall from a golden age. It will feel like schedules slipping, margins thinning, outages stretching, and dumb luck becoming policy. You won't notice the ladder until your foot finds air. The flip side is real. Parallel ladders mean we can rebuild fast if we protect the four threads on purpose. Precision, train and measure. Power control, seal and verify. Logistics, add slack and choreograph. Information, double seal and audit. Do that and collapses turn into resets, not ruins. One last question before we move. In your world, what's the maintenance hatch everyone steps past because it isn't pretty? That's the niche to save first. That's where ladders stop snapping. Human moments that make it real. The jar bit him once, just enough to teach respect. He kept it under linen in the cool corner, a copper strip nicked twice for this side east, an iron pin nicked once for altar. Before dawn, he lowered a coin die into a sour bath. When the gray lifted clean from tight curls he couldn't reach with chalk, he smiled, wiped his fingers on his apron, and scratched a second nick into the stopper so the apprentice wouldn't reverse the bite and earn a sting. Across the harbor, the dockmaster watched the moon, not the crowd. He stood where his heel had worn a shallow shine in the threshold stone. When the shadow on the gatepost reached the cut he'd made last summer, he raised his arm. Two men leaned on the sluice bars. Water shouldered into the sacrificial pocket. The basin hissed, the silt died in the corner, and a hull that would have grounded slid out like it heard the clock. Up on a ridge, the bridge keeper plucked the main cable and listened. It sang a little flat. He didn't argue with pitch. He walked down to the square and started the renewal song too fast on purpose. People laughed, then frowned, then fetched coils. By evening, the deck mats lay new, the lay angles matched the old, and the catenary hummed true under a sky that didn't care. In a high room with open air, a surgeon tapped a blade through flame until it answered in a lower key. Honey warmed, wine and resin waited, clean cloth sat in the wind. She scraped slow and true, breathed with the city's breeze, and set the dressing when the smell said right. Weeks later, the bone rim showed a soft, pale lip. She pressed her finger to it and nodded to the family, then sent the blade to the brazier again because rituals are just protocols you can hum. At the quarry wall, a foreman ran his thumb along a wax gate and felt where hot metal would breathe. He added a riser with the same care he used to cut bread, then chalked a note on the wall, 2 strokes and a dot for the next hand to see. Down in the foundry, a caster dragged a nail across a cured hull. It whispered dry. The brushers had earned their pay. In a market alley, a clerk split a tally stick, pressed both halves to his cheek to feel the same cool, and handed the foil across with a look that said, "We'll make this whole." On a hot afternoon, a fountain inspector's rod clicked the same notch it had clicked for 20 years. He didn't look at the crowd. He listened for the sound that meant the neighborhood would go about its business without his name. And under a field that looked like nothing, a Puquio keeper dropped a tuft of llama hair into a spiral and watched it skitter. He opened the next helix one turn. The air sighed, the water moved, and a line of green that had no right to be there stayed alive another season. These are the people ladders are made of. Thumbs reading heat, ears reading tension, noses reading chemistry, mouths carrying songs that double as checklists. Nothing mystical. Just competence you can feel in your bones and would miss in a week if it went quiet. The manuals were never gone. They're etched into gauge cuts, nicked stoppers, lids that seal by weight, and scars that prove hands knew what they were doing. If you want to watch these ladders rebuilt piece by practical piece, stay with us. Subscribe now, drop the artifact we missed in the comments, and then queue up the Antikythera Gear Lab and the Baalbek logistics test. One detail from your notes might be the rung everyone else needs.